Hello everyone, thanks for stopping in, and today we're going to finish 10.2. Remember, we'd already done the first 2 pages of the notes, and now we're going to continue from where we said we would last time in the 10.2 video, right? We're starting on page 3. First is a definition of what is a partial payment. A partial payment is any payment made before the due date for less than the full amount. It's any payment made before the due date for less than the full amount. So this is how many loans are repaid, right? People usually pay off on them before they get there. Now, in the United States, there's a specific way partial payments are managed. First, if there's a partial payment made, the first step is interest is computed from loan start up to partial payment date. The interest is computed from the loan start up until the partial payment date. So you compute the interest for the small interval you have used already. And then, step 2, the partial payment, I'm going to abbreviate it part pay. The partial payment is applied to the interest first, and then the principal second. So the partial payment money actually pays off the interest first and does not get applied to the principal until after the interest has been paid, up until that date, right? We only compute interest up until the partial payment date. It's not the whole interest, it's just the interest up until that point. And then, in order to find the new interest due, we can recalculate interest from partial payment date, the partial payment date, until the loan is due. So then you recalculate the interest from that point onwards. You recalculate your interest. Now, with this United States rule, it will help to know how many days are between different dates. For example, if I take out a loan on April 7th and it's a 180-day loan, it would be useful for me to know when that loan will be due. And that is where this chart will come in handy. April 7th, we can look up in this chart. April 7th is the 97th day. So if I write April 7, that is the 97th day. So if I want to find the due date, I can add 180 days to April. Let's see, that gives me 772, 277. So on the 277th day of the year, my loan will be due. What date does the 277th day of the year correspond to? Well, if I look at my table, 277 is right here, and that's October 4th. So my loan would be due on October 4th. This chart allows me to quickly work with dates. So if I take a loan out on the 7th for 180 days, it's due on the 4th of October. Now, we can also calculate how many days are between two different dates. If we look up March 15th and November 18th, I can find what day of the year they are. March 15th is the 74th day of the year. March 15th is the 74th day of the year. So I'll put 74 here. Now, November 18th, let's see, November and 18, right? November 18th is the 322nd day of the year. So that's 322. Well, to figure out how many days are between these two numbers, you can subtract them, right? That's how you can find the difference between two numbers. So I'll do 322 minus 74. That gives me, 248? 248 days. So that's how long my loan would be. Let's use the banker's rule now to determine the simple interest that will be paid on a $2,700 loan at an interest rate of 2% for the period of March 15th to November 18th, right? This same period. So let's look. We're looking for the interest, and it's simple interest, so I know I'm going to use the formula I equals principal times rate times time, and it tells me I'm taking out $2,700. It tells me the rate is 2%, but remember that needs to be a decimal, 0.02, right? And then the time. The time is 248 days, which I need to convert to years. Be careful, though. The banker's rule tells us a year has 360 days. Remember that. The banker's rule says a year only has 360 days. So, 248 days over 360 will tell me how many years it is. Now, if you want to, you can divide this right now, 248 divided by 360, and write 0.6888888. Or you can just keep it as a fraction so you can save yourself a little bit of decimals and then divide it in the equation. I'm going to save myself a bit of writing and divide it during the equation, because I know interest will be equal to 2,700 times 0.02 times the time, which remember is 248 over 360. Or you could write the decimal. Both are fine options. So when I multiply, I'll have 2,700 times 0.02 times 248 divided by 360 gives me that the interest is equal to 37.2, which remember as money would be $37.20. So the interest on this loan from the 15th of March to the 18th of November at $2,700 and a rate of 2% is $37.20. We can calculate loans with random values. Now, this next example is going to be a little bit involved, but you'll want to pay close attention because some point in your life, I guarantee you'll have loans and you'll want to make payments on them, and this sort of problem will help you understand what is going on. So let's look at this example. This example says, Mr. Painter, that's me, attended a national teachers conference last year. So in 2019, right? To pay for his airfare on the 1st of November 2018, I took out a 120-day loan, all right, at an interest rate of 12.5%. Okay, nifty. Mr. Painter used some holiday money to make a partial payment of $150 on the 5th of January 2019. And then he made a second partial payment of $100 on the 2nd of February 2019. So I made two partial payments. Multiple parts. Let's read each part. Determine the due date of the loan. All right. Part B. Determine the interest and the amount credited to the principal on the 5th of January. All right. So I look at what happens when I make this payment on the 5th. C. Determine the interest and the amount credited to the principal on the 2nd of February. Okay. So I figure out what happens on the 2nd of February. And then I determine the amount that Mr. Painter, myself, paid on the due date. I look at each of these values. I have to walk through the different portions. So, let's do part A first. The loan came out on November 1st, right? That's the day I took the loan, which, if we look at our chart, is the 305th day. So it's on the 305th day. Now, I have 120 days for my loan, right? So if I add these together, my loan would be due on the 425th day of the year. Now, that doesn't work, does it? 425, if I add, on the 425th day, that's not going to be a usable date. So, that extends into a new year, doesn't it? So, in order to use this chart, I need to go past the new year point. So I'm going to subtract 365 from that number, which will give me 60. So it's 60 days into the new year. So 60 days into the year, if I'm looking at my chart, the 60th day of the year is the 1st of March, right? So this will be March 1st. My loan is due March 1st. Now, 2019 is not a leap year, right? I started in 2018 and this is due in 2019. If it was a leap year, there's a little addendum down here for leap years, right? But we don't need to worry about a leap year, right? So, March 1st is the due date. I took the loan out on November 1st. It was due on March 1st. That's part A, right? We used the table. Notice we had to bleed into a new year, but that's okay. We can just shift back by a year, right? Now, determine the interest in the amount credited to the principal on the 5th of January. So for part B, I need to find a few different things. First, I need to find out how many days pass from November 1st to January 5th. I need to figure out how many days pass. Now, we already said November 1st is the 305th day. January 5th would be the 5th day, right? January 5th would be the 5th day. But it's in a new year, right? So I need to add, there's 365 days from this year. If I want to put it into terms of this year, it would actually be on the 370th day of the year, right? Think about it like December 31st would be 365, January 1st would be 366, right? We're counting the days into the next year. So 305 to 370, well, how many days pass between those two dates? That's 65 days of time, right? 65 days have passed between November 1st and January 5th. Notice we keep using the fact that there's 365 days in a year. Now, I can calculate the interest that has accumulated over these first 65 days. So, we're going to use the formula for interest, right? Interest equals principal times rate times time. Well, let's calculate. The interest is equal to the principal. How much loan did I take out? $400, right? My loan was for $400. So my principal is $400. The rate up here was 12.5%, which as a decimal is 0.125. And the time that has elapsed so far was 65 days. Be careful. When you're calculating in the interest formula, there's 360 days in a year. It might seem confusing to use 360 here and 365 here, but that is, remember, that is the banker's rule. When calculating, there's only 360 days in a year. So, I can calculate the interest that has accumulated from November 1st to January 5th using this formula. So 400 times 0.125 times 65 divided by 360 is 9.03, right? Money's always rounded to 2 decimal places. So the interest is 9.03. So, determine the interest, 9.03. How much was credited to the principal? Well, how much did I pay? I paid $150 on the 5th, right? So from my $150, $9.03 of it goes to the interest first. 150 minus 9.03 means there was $140.97 left over for my principal. Right? You have to pay the interest off first. So I'm actually only paying $141-ish onto my loan. I'm only paying $141-ish, right? Because I have to pay off this interest first. That's how much interest I've built up. I got to pay the interest first. So, I can calculate how much of my principal is left as well. If my original principal was $400 and I'm paying $140.97, well, I can subtract those, right? And I'm going to get $259.03 left to pay. This is how much of the principal I have left to pay off. So that was part B. I figured out what was going on the 5th. On the 5th of January, 65 days have elapsed for my loan. 65 out of 360 gave me the time. My principal was the whole amount, $400. My interest rate was 0.125, which told me that on January 5th I'd accrued around $9 of interest. From November to January, I got about $9 worth of interest. I then paid $150, 9 of which had to go to the interest first, which left me with $141 or so left over, right? We got to keep track of the decimals, but I'm just being generous with the numbers. I'm rounding them for the explanation, right? So this is how much was left to apply to the principal. Interest first, principal second. So the principal, $400, that's how much I borrowed. I have now paid $140.97 of it. That means I have $259.03 left to pay. Cool. That'll help me in part C. Because now look, I make a second payment on the 2nd of February. So from January 5th to February 2nd. January 5th is the 5th day of the year. We already found that. February 2nd is the 33rd day of the year. And 33 minus 5 is 28 days, right? So 28 days have now elapsed from January 5th to February 2nd. This is my new period I am accruing interest over. This is my new period to calculate interest. Now, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to plug into the interest formula. Interest. Now, I have already paid some of my principal. I have this much left to pay. That is the new number I will use for my principal. It's my adjusted principal, right? I've already paid some of it. I paid part of it early on the 5th. Now, the interest rate has not changed. That is still 0.125, right? And now, how much time has elapsed? 28 days out of, careful, remember it's 360 days in the formula, right? That's how many days are in a year according to the bank. So I can calculate my new interest. My new interest from January 5th to February 2nd will be equal to this. So we have 259.03, how much principal I have left to pay, times 0.125, times 28, divided by 360. So I get 2.52. Remember, money's always two decimal places. 2.52. So I've only accumulated $250 in interest. It's not many days, though, right? 28 days isn't that long of a time period. 252 isn't that much interest. Now, that's how much interest. How much is credited to the principal? Well, I paid $100, right? I paid $100. So, if I take my $100 payment and subtract the 252, I learn that I have paid $97.48 to the principal, right? $97.40. You got to pay the interest first. So I paid $97.48 to the principal. Now, the principal is $259.03 because I've already paid some of it, right? I already paid some of it on the 5th. Now it's the 2nd of February, right? So, if the new principal is $259.03, I can subtract my partial payment, right? $97.48 will go to my principal. And so let's calculate 259.03 minus 97.48 gives me $161.55 left to pay. $161.55 left to pay, right? So this is how much interest there was, this is how much is applied to the principal, and this is how much is left to pay, right? Notice we're redoing a lot of the same calculations, right? We're just plugging in different numbers and different time frames. That is how partial payments work. Now, after I made that partial payment, I don't make any other payments until the due date. So Part D says how much is due now. Well, for Part D, well, I made a payment on February 2nd, and the loan is due on March 1st. We already calculated that, right? March 1st. February 2nd was the 33rd day of the year. March 1st was the 60th day of the year, right? So, 60 minus 33 tells me 27 days have now elapsed, right? There's been 27 days from my last partial payment until the due date. So, I can calculate how much interest is going to accrue. Interest is equal to, I have $161.55 left to pay. That will be my new principal. Notice the principal went from 400 to 259 to 161. It keeps decreasing because I keep making payments. The interest rate is still 0.125. Now the time period is 27 days. Once again, we use the banker's rule because we're calculating for the bank now, right? 27 over 360, which tells me how much interest am I making between February and March? Well, 161.55 times 0.125 times 27 divided by 360 is about $1.51. So I have $151 in interest built up until the due date. So how much is left to pay? Well, if there was $161.55 on the principal and $151 on the interest, if I take the principal and add the interest, I get $163.06. So on the final due date, I had to pay $163.06. $163.06 on the due date. Now, this example was long, lots of steps. Let's walk back through quickly. First, we have the initial date of the loan, and it's for 120 days. We determined that that was the 1st of March was the due date. Now, on January 5th, I paid some of my loan. we calculated that there were 65 days from November 1st until January 5th. Now, over those 65 days, interest accrued. I had a $400 loan at 12.5% and 65 days worth of time. That told me an interest of $903. Now, I made a payment of $150 on that day. On January 5th, I paid $150. $150 applied to the interest first means there was $140.97 left over for the principal. So my principal had $259.03 left over. I calculated how much remained. Then, from the 5th of January to the 2nd of February, some time passed, and then I made another payment, specifically 28 days of time. So how much interest built over those 28 days? Well, the interest only builds on the new principal. How much is left? I've already paid some of it. It's still the same rate, and now the time is 28 days. That was about $250 worth of interest over those 28 days. Now, over those 28 days, I have $250 of interest. So my $100 payment, first I pay that $252, which means I had $97.48 left for my principal, right? $259.03, that's how much my principal was. Minus $97.48 told me there was $161.55 left over to pay. I didn't make any more payments, so from that payment on the 2nd until March 1st, 27 more days passed. So 27 days worth of interest was accrued on my remaining $161, which we calculated as about $1.50. So the total amount due at the end of my loan is now only $163.06. So on the last day of my loan, I pay $163.06. So how much total did I pay? Well, let's check it out. We paid $100 plus $150 plus $163.06. I paid $413.06, right? Those are my three payments, right? I paid $100, $150, and then my last payment is $163. So that matches my intuition. My loan's for $400. It should make sense I paid back a little bit more than $400, right? That's how interest works. You can get an idea. You can not really double check, but you can check your intuition and make sure that the numbers at least make sense. When you add up all your payments, it has to be more than the value of the loan. Otherwise, that's not how interest works, right? Interest is always more than the amount you borrowed, right? When you're paying it back. So, on the homework, there will be an example like this. In the live sessions, I will be going over this example from the homework in detail to make sure we see it. This is something that will happen in your life, and it'll be better for you if you understand what's going on as you're making partial payments on loans, right? We all take out loans, whether it's to buy a house, a car, student loans for college, and we might make partial payments along the way. These sort of calculations help us understand how the interest and money is being applied. It gives us a better picture of where our money is going. That's called good financial knowledge, right? Bit involved to calculate, but it's always the same formula. I equals PRT. And that is the end of section 10.2. Thank you for stopping in, and I'll see you next time.